Hey King's Cross, we've got something great to share with you today. Our new logo and branding package is done and we are thrilled to be able to share it with you and to get it into your hands. Let me tell you a little bit about the process that went into this and then we'll share the details with you from there. In our 25 years as a church, we've been committed to bringing the good news of Jesus Christ to our community here in southern Middle Tennessee. Over the past several months, we have worked together as a church to think intentionally and to refocus our purpose and our mission as a church. And so you've heard us talk about this new sense of mission, vision, and core values as we've tried to live deeper into who God has made us to be as a church. From the very beginning, we've tried to be the kind of church where people can go first to take a risk on Jesus, or a place where they can go before they're ready to give up on Jesus. And as we've gone through our intentional mission and vision process, we've tried to give ourselves clear and focused language about how we as a church can step deeper into this sense of calling and mission. So you've heard us talk about that process over the last several months. It was a process that was led by our staff and our shepherding council, and then that we talked about and prayed over as a church. And so it's often easy for us to think about mission and vision and language like that as just more words. But nothing could be further from the truth. As Abraham Heschel reminds us, words create worlds. And so we believe that our language is really important. It focuses who we are as a community, and it focuses our sense of mission and purpose in our community. And so you've heard us talk about that we believe our mission is to embrace brokenness and champion wholeness in and through Jesus Christ. We believe that this is worthy work because whole people can change the whole world. That's rooted deeply in two pieces of scripture from 2 Kings chapter 5 and Luke chapter 15, where we see God coming to us, offering the promise and the good news of wholeness in and through Jesus Christ. And so we wanted to be intentional not only about the words that we use to tell the story of God's work in our church, but also the visual tools that we use to tell that same story. And so that led us into this process of a new logo and rebranding, and we're really excited about what's come out of that process. But we wanted to make sure that you knew that what you're about to see is rooted deeply in the story of who we are as a church and the stories of how God has shown up in our midst. So let's start there.
Embracing brokenness and championing wholeness in and through Jesus Christ has given me language, I think, to just what I've been experiencing, even kind of before leading up to when that phrase was introduced. And I think embracing brokenness is just something that has been hard for me my whole life.
So championing wholeness out of brokenness in and through Jesus Christ. To me, first you have to, well, I remember being a young Christian that looked outward and with empathy at all of those broken people out there. And years later, I remember being the person that finally realized I'm one of those broken people too. I'm pretty messed up and need to change that. I need to fix that. And now I recognize that part of the glory that God is allowing me to witness is that brokenness in a way is a blessing. It's a sacrifice, if you will. If I could fix it, that would mean it was within my power and didn't need God. I didn't need salvation, but I do. And, you know, I'm wholly unworthy of anything that I've ever experienced or achieved that was good. So championing wholeness is a recognition that part of my wholeness is embracing that I'm broken and that the necessity of that salvation is what makes us whole.
I do believe that whole people can change the whole world. And I think it's interesting to consider what makes a person whole and the different aspects of their life and their life story and who they are in all those many different roles that they play. Family member, employee, maybe employer, community member in some form or fashion, volunteer, nurse or teacher. And so I think it's important to know that sometimes to have the impact that you want, you have to look at how those different roles come together as a whole person. And only Christ can help us round out those many different images of who we are and the different roles that we play in different people's lives to have the kind of impact that He has designed for us.
I went to Franklin for an appointment, and I just noticed everything was in bloom there earlier. It was like a week or so earlier before things started to bloom here. And so there were these really pretty pink trees in a lot of the landscaping, and I wondered what they were, so I asked my parents, and they said they were the crabapple trees. And I thought, I've had a crabapple tree, and it did not do that. It didn't bloom like that. I must have had a different type of tree. And I was just kind of like, well, that just doesn't make sense. And I felt God prompting me just to go by my old yard where I used to live. And I drove by, I drove by, and then I made my family drive by. But I drove by, and this tree was pink, and it was full of blooms, and it was the same as I'd seen before. But that tree had been in our yard probably, 15 years at least that we lived there. And I'd never once noticed that it had pink blooms. And it really made me sad. But at the same time, I felt that God was saying, see, I'm rewriting. Some of those times that felt dark, there was color. And it made me see that God was patient and kind, and that beauty was always there. And so when we go and we take God into our stories, I think He adds the color when we can start to weave our story with His story.
So I think the idea of rebranding is fantastic. Through my work with Horseplay, I've been lucky enough to go to some conferences. I've been in the nonprofit world for several years now, so I can appreciate all that a good branding can help you with, both as an organization and as an individual. And one of the interesting things that we have been working through lately as a family has been explaining what we believe in simple ways to Elena, who is 6, and asking all kinds of questions. And so the idea of having a way just a different way to share that with her, so that she could think about it in a new way, something that was simple, would be really exciting to me. We would love that.
When we sat down to take the next step in our mission and vision process to articulate the sense of God's calling in our lives visually, we knew that we wanted to capture the essence of some of these stories that you've heard, this testimony of who God has been in our life and in our community over these last 25 years. So when we began to think about updating our branding, which is another way of saying our visual storytelling, we had a couple of criteria. We wanted things to be clean and accessible. We wanted it to be beautiful. We wanted it to be something that you and I could easily replicate. As one of my dreams for this logo, that it was something that you and I could sit down for lunch or coffee, we could pull up a napkin and grab a pen and begin to draw out that logo, to have that visual. And that when we did it, it wouldn't just be beautiful to look at, but it would be a tool for us to tell this story of embracing brokenness and championing wholeness in and through Jesus Christ. And now that we're on the other side of this process and have things in hand, I couldn't be more excited because I think it checks all those boxes. Here, take a look. Now, there are 5 things about this logo that I want to draw your attention to as you look at it, because I think they highlight 5 key elements about who God is, who we are as a church, and who we think God is calling us to be. First, right there at the very center, you'll see a cross. That is at the heart of who we are. We are Jesus people proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ in our world and throughout our community. Second, you'll see that same cross actually reminds us of the crossroads. You may or may not know this, but the name King's Cross comes from Britain, where in the 19th century, about the year 1830, there was a busy intersection on the outskirts of London. It was a time of the Industrial Revolution, the city was growing, commerce was expanding, and there at a very busy intersection, King George IV had a statue of himself erected. Now, people weren't too thrilled about the statue. They didn't like the way it looked. They didn't like the way it blocked traffic. And so it didn't last very long, maybe about 12 years or so before it was torn down. But that intersection was forever after known as King's Cross. Well, we love the idea to say, what does it look like for us to stand at the crossroads of our community, of our industry? But instead of an earthly king being at the center, we proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ, a different king at the center of that crossroads of industry, commerce, and the marketplace. Third, you'll find that the squares move through a progression from brokenness to wholeness as you move around. It's a reminder that we believe God is at work in all of us, individually and collectively, moving us through the progression of our own brokenness into wholeness rooted in Him. Fourth, you'll see that there are 4 squares. That reminds us that Scripture talks about wholeness in 4 dimensions. God sees us not as just a one-dimensional person, but God sees us in our heart, soul, mind, and strength. He sees us emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, and physically. When we talk about championing wholeness in and through Jesus Christ, we believe it occurs in all 4 of those places. Fifth and last, you'll see that all of our visual storytelling is rooted through the color blue. That's a reminder not only of the promise of baptism, but of the story of Naaman, 2 Kings 5, where it's in the washing of the water in the River Jordan, where Naaman experiences wholeness in and through God. And so we hope that going forward, this logo is a tool to remind us about who we are as a church and who God is calling us to be. So you'll begin to see it all kinds of wonderful places through a new website, through our live stream and video, and we'll begin to give you tools where you can share this on social media, you can use it throughout your daily life, and it'll be a tool to help you tell the story of who we are as a church and who God is calling us to be as a people on mission for Him and our community. We hope you enjoy it, and we can't wait to see all the great ways that it appears in our lives and in the life of our community.